I thought you were at a work trip, my fiancée stammered, but there she was in a wedding dress next to my brother. I grabbed the mic and said 4 words that ended everything. But before I tell you what those 4 words were, let me share something incredible with you. I'm amazed by how many people from different places tune in to hear these real stories about standing up when it matters most. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe because I've got more stories about finding strength in the darkest moments. Now, let me take you back to how this nightmare began. My name is David, I'm 32 years old, and 3 months ago I thought I had the perfect life. Sarah and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and our wedding was supposed to be in 6 weeks. She was everything I thought I wanted: beautiful, smart, ambitious, and she got along perfectly with my family. Maybe too perfectly, as I'd soon discover. The lie started on a Tuesday morning in March. Sarah was rushing around our apartment, throwing clothes into her overnight bag with unusual urgency. The Chicago conference got moved up, she said, not making eye contact as she zipped her bag shut. I have to leave today instead of tomorrow. You know how crazy these work trips get. I'll probably be in meetings non-stop. I was making coffee, completely oblivious to the performance happening behind me. That sucks, babe. How long will you be gone? Just 3 days. 4 at most. She kissed me quickly on the cheek. I'll call you tonight, okay? Something felt off about her energy, but I chalked it up to work stress. Sarah was a marketing director for a tech company, and these last-minute changes weren't unusual. Or so I told myself. Drive safe, I called out as she headed for the door. Love you. Love you too, she replied, but the words sounded hollow, like she was reading from a script. That was the last honest conversation we'd ever have. The first day passed normally. I worked late, grabbed dinner with my buddy Jake, and went to bed early. When Sarah didn't call that night, I figured she was exhausted from travel and meetings. The second day, I sent her a few texts that went unanswered. By the third day, I was starting to worry. Hey, just checking in. Hope the conference is going well. Miss you. No response. Sarah, everything okay? You've been radio silent? Nothing. By Thursday morning, my concern had turned into something darker. Sarah was many things, but she wasn't a bad communicator. Even during her busiest work trips, she'd send at least a goodnight text. This complete silence was unprecedented. I decided to call her office. Hi, this is David, Sarah's fiancé. I'm trying to reach her about a family emergency. Could you transfer me to wherever she's staying in Chicago? There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. I'm sorry, sir, but Sarah requested time off this week. She's not on a business trip with us. The words hit me like a physical blow. The coffee mug in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Are you sure? She said she had a conference in Chicago. I'm positive, sir. Sarah cleared her schedule through Friday. She said she had personal matters to attend to. Personal matters. The phrase echoed in my head as I hung up the phone. What personal matters? We were engaged, living together, planning a wedding. What could be so personal that she'd lie to me about it? That's when my phone buzzed with a text from my brother Marcus. Can't make Sunday dinner this week. Out of town until Monday. The coincidence was too strange to ignore. Sarah and Marcus were both mysteriously out of town at the same time, both lying about where they were going. My hands were shaking as I opened Sarah's laptop. We shared passwords, another sign of our supposed trust and transparency. Her email was open, and what I found there made my blood run cold. Hotel reservation confirmations. Not for Chicago, for Napa Valley, California. A rental car booked under both Sarah and Marcus's names. And then, buried in her deleted emails folder, I found something that shattered my world completely. A forwarded message about wedding venue availability at a boutique winery in Sonoma County. The date? Today, Thursday, March 23rd. My fiancé was getting married, just not to me. As I stared at that email confirmation, 3 years of memories came flooding back, but now they looked completely different. All those moments I'd brushed off as coincidences suddenly formed a pattern so obvious that I felt sick for missing it. It started about a year into our relationship. Sarah and Marcus began having these long conversations at family gatherings. At first I was thrilled. My girlfriend was bonding with my brother. What could be better? They'd disappear onto the back porch during barbecues, talking and laughing for hours. What do you two find to talk about for so long? I'd joke, and they'd exchange a look I couldn't quite read. Just getting to know each other, Sarah would say, but there was something in her smile that felt rehearsed. Marcus, my younger brother by 3 years, had always been the charming one. Where I was steady and reliable, he was spontaneous and magnetic. Growing up, he'd effortlessly attracted friends, dates, opportunities. Everything seemed to come easier to him. But we'd never competed over the same woman before. At least I thought we hadn't. The text messages started about 6 months ago. Sarah's phone would buzz constantly during our quiet evenings together. When I'd glance over, she'd quickly flip it face down. Work stuff, she'd explain. But who gets work messages at 10 p.m. on a Saturday? Then there were the mysterious girls' nights that became more frequent. Sarah had never been particularly social with female friends before, but suddenly she was going out twice a week. Which friends? I'd ask. Oh, you don't know them. College friends visiting from out of town. But when I suggested we all hang out together sometime, she'd get flustered and change the subject. The most obvious red flag was the wedding planning itself. For someone who'd dreamed of her wedding day since childhood, Sarah seemed oddly detached from our preparations. She'd nod along when I showed her venue options, give vague responses about dress shopping, and seemed relieved whenever we postponed planning sessions. We have plenty of time, she'd say. No need to rush. But the woman who used to screenshot wedding dresses from Instagram was suddenly too busy to care about flower arrangements. And Marcus, my own brother, was pulling away too. We used to grab beers every couple of weeks, text regularly, hang out during family dinners. But over the past year he'd become distant, almost guilty around me. When Sarah and I would announce wedding milestones, he'd congratulate us, but his smile never reached his eyes. The worst part was how they'd act around each other when they thought no one was looking. I caught glimpses, Marcus's hand lingering on Sarah's back when he'd move past her in the kitchen, Sarah laughing at Marcus's jokes just a little too enthusiastically, the way they'd both go quiet when I entered a room. But the human brain is remarkably good at protecting itself from painful truths. Every time doubt crept in, I'd rationalize it away. Sarah was just stressed about work. Marcus was going through a rough patch with his own love life. They were both important to me, so of course I wanted them to get along. I even made excuses for the financial inconsistencies. Sarah had been spending more money lately. New clothes, expensive dinners with friends, weekend trips I was never invited on. When I'd ask about our joint savings account for the wedding, she'd get defensive. I'm contributing plenty, she'd snap. Don't you trust me? Of course I trusted her. That was the problem. The cruelest irony was that I'd actually been happy about how well Sarah fit into my family. My parents adored her. She remembered everyone's birthdays. She'd volunteer to help with family events. She'd become such an integral part of our lives that losing her would mean losing a piece of my family too. But she wasn't just leaving me. She was stealing my brother in the process. As I sat there with her laptop open, reading email after email of wedding preparations that didn't include me, I realized the depth of their planning. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a moment of weakness. They'd been systematically plotting this betrayal for months. Venue deposits paid 3 months ago, dress fittings scheduled around times when I'd be at work, a honeymoon booked to Bali, the same destination Sarah and I had talked about for our own trip. They'd stolen our entire future and repackaged it as their own. My phone rang, jolting me from my spiral of realization. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. For a split second I considered answering, demanding an explanation. But then I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't a pocket dial or coincidence. He was calling to maintain the lie, to check if I suspected anything. Even now, hours before he married my fiancée, he was still pretending to be my brother. I let it go to voicemail and listened to his message with growing rage. Hey Dave, just checking in from my work trip. Hope you and Sarah are doing well. See you when I get back on Monday. Love you, bro. Love you, bro. The casual cruelty of those words lit something on fire inside my chest. They weren't just betraying me, they were mocking me, confident that I'd never figure it out. But they were wrong. The hotel they'd booked wasn't just any hotel. It was the Fairmont Sonoma Mission Inn, the same place Sarah had bookmarked on her laptop 6 months ago when we were looking at honeymoon destinations. She'd shown me the photos, eyes bright with excitement, talking about how romantic it would be to get married surrounded by vineyards. Someday, she'd said, curling up next to me on the couch, we'll have our perfect wedding there. She was right about the perfect wedding. She'd just lied about the groom. I called the hotel, my heart hammering against my ribs. Fairmont Sonoma Mission Inn, how may I help you? Hi, I'm trying to reach Sarah Mitchell. She should be staying there with Marcus Thompson. It's a family emergency. 1 moment, please. The hold music felt like it lasted forever. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out guest information. However, I can tell you that we do have a private wedding event scheduled in our vineyard pavilion this evening at 5 p.m. If this is regarding that event, you might want to speak with our events coordinator. A private wedding event. Tonight. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. Actually, yes. That's exactly what I need. Could you transfer me? Of course, please hold. Another eternity of hold music, then a cheerful female voice. Wedding coordination. This is Jennifer. How can I help you? I took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the performance of my life. Hi, Jennifer. This is David Thompson, Marcus's brother. I'm supposed to be at the wedding tonight, but I've lost all the details. Could you remind me of the timing? Oh, wonderful. We're so excited for Marcus and Sarah's big day. The ceremony begins at 5 p.m. in the Vineyard Pavilion, followed by cocktail hour and dinner in the private dining room. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. The sunset ceremony they requested will be perfect. Sunset ceremony. Sarah had always talked about wanting to get married at sunset, with golden light filtering through the trees. Another dream of ours that she'd simply transferred to him. And the guest count again? I want to make sure I haven't forgotten anyone. It's quite intimate. Just 20 guests total. Very romantic and private, just like they wanted. 20 guests. They'd invited people to celebrate this betrayal. Friends and family who knew what they were doing and chose to be complicit in destroying my life. Perfect. And remind me of the address? I don't want to be late. Jennifer rattled off the address, completely unsuspecting that she was arming a man whose world had just imploded. I thanked her, hung up and immediately booked the first flight to San Francisco. The 3-hour flight was the longest of my life. I kept staring at my phone, looking at photos of Sarah and me, wondering when exactly she'd decided I wasn't enough. Had she been thinking about Marcus during our romantic dinners? When she said yes to my proposal, was she already planning to say it again to someone else? I thought about calling my parents, but what would I say? Hey, Mom, just wanted to let you know that your youngest son is marrying my fiancée in a few hours, and I'm flying across the country to crash their secret wedding. It sounded insane even to me. The rental car counter took forever. Traffic was a nightmare, and by the time I reached Sonoma County, it was already 4:30 p.m. I was cutting it close, but maybe that was better. I wanted to arrive right in the middle of their perfect moment. The Fairmont was exactly as beautiful as Sarah had described. Rolling hills covered in grapevines, golden afternoon light, the kind of setting that belonged on a postcard. As I drove up the winding path to the hotel, I could see white chairs arranged in neat rows in the distance, flowers decorating an archway, guests beginning to take their seats. Sarah's dream wedding was happening. She'd just swapped out the groom. I parked far enough away that I wouldn't be spotted and walked closer, staying behind the trees that bordered the vineyard. From my hidden vantage point, I could see everything. There was my mother, dabbing her eyes with a tissue as she spoke to Sarah's parents. My father stood nearby, looking uncomfortable in his best suit. Sarah's sister was adjusting flowers on the archway, laughing at something someone had said. They all knew. Every single person sitting in those white chairs knew that Sarah was supposed to marry me, and they'd chosen to be here instead. The betrayal wasn't just coming from Sarah and Marcus, it was coming from everyone I'd trusted. At 4:55, the music started. A string quartet began playing Canon in D, the same song Sarah had picked for our processional. The guests stood and turned toward the back of the aisle. Marcus appeared first, walking with more confidence than I'd ever seen from him. He was wearing the same style tuxedo we'd picked out together for my wedding. His best man, our cousin Jake, walked beside him, both of them grinning like this was the happiest day of their lives. Then came the bridesmaids, Sarah's sister, and 2 women I didn't recognize. They were wearing the same shade of dusty rose that Sarah had chosen for our wedding party. And then Sarah appeared. She was radiant in a way that made my chest ache. The dress was everything she'd described wanting, flowing, romantic, with delicate lace sleeves and a train that caught the golden light. Her hair was swept up in the elegant updo she'd practiced in our bathroom mirror a dozen times. She was glowing with happiness, walking toward my brother with the kind of joy that should have been mine. But what broke me completely was the look on Marcus's face when he saw her. It was pure, unguarded love, the way I'd looked at her when I proposed, the way I'd imagined looking at her on our wedding day. He wasn't just stealing my fiancée, he genuinely loved her in a way that made my own feelings feel small and insignificant. They'd found something real together, and all it had cost them was my entire world. As Sarah reached the altar and took Marcus's hands, I knew I had two choices. I could walk away, let them have their moment, and deal with the aftermath later, or I could make sure they'd never forget the price of their happiness. The officiant began to speak, his voice carrying across the vineyard. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Sarah and Marcus." I started walking toward the ceremony, no longer caring who saw me. It was time to crash a wedding. The walk from my hiding spot to the ceremony felt like moving through quicksand. Every step carried the weight of 4 years of love, 8 months of engagement, and the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. The distance couldn't have been more than 50 yards, but it felt like crossing an ocean of betrayal. As I got closer, I could hear the officiant's voice more clearly. "Marriage is a sacred bond between two souls who have found in each other their perfect complement." Perfect complement. The irony was devastating. Sarah and I had always joked that we were perfectly complementary. She was spontaneous where I was cautious, creative where I was practical, social where I was reserved. But apparently, she'd found an even better complement in my own brother. I stayed low, moving between the decorative trees and plants that lined the vineyard. The guests were completely absorbed in the ceremony, their attention focused on the happy couple. No one thought to look back toward the parking area, where a ghost from the bride's past was advancing with nothing left to lose. My phone had been buzzing with notifications during the flight and drive, but I'd ignored them all. Now, crouched behind a large oak tree about 20 feet from the back row of chairs, I finally looked at the messages. 3 missed calls from Sarah. 7 text messages. "Hey babe, just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you even though I'm swamped with work stuff. The conference is so boring. Wish you were here to make it fun. Missing you lots. Can't wait to get home and start planning our wedding again." The casual cruelty of those messages while she was literally getting ready to marry my brother was breathtaking. She wasn't just lying to me. She was putting effort into the lies, crafting detailed deceptions to keep me placated while she destroyed our life together. The worst message had come just an hour ago. "Flight delayed, might not be home until Saturday. Love you so much. Can't wait to see you." She was still lying, even now, minutes before she said, "I do," to someone else. Some part of her was still trying to maintain the fiction that she was my loving fiancé, probably planning to come home and pretend this weekend never happened. But then I noticed something that made my blood run even colder. There was a message I'd missed, sent to both Sarah and me in a group text from my mother. "So excited for tonight. You two are going to be so beautiful together." My mother wasn't just here as a guest. She'd helped plan this. My own mother had been actively involved in orchestrating the betrayal of her eldest son. The ceremony was moving forward. I could see Sarah and Marcus exchanging rings. My grandmother's ring that I'd given to Sarah was nowhere to be seen, replaced by something new and shiny that matched the life they'd built in secret. "Sarah," the officiant said, his voice carrying clearly across the vineyard, "do you take Marcus to be your husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" There was a pause that felt eternal. This was it. The moment Sarah would officially choose my brother over me, would promise to love him the way she'd promised to love me just 8 months ago. "I do," she said, her voice strong and clear and happy. "Marcus, do you take Sarah to be your wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" Marcus's response came without hesitation. "I do. By the power vested in me by the state of California, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride." The guests erupted in applause as Marcus lifted Sarah's veil and kissed her with the kind of passion that left no doubt about his feelings. This wasn't a marriage of convenience or rebellion. This was a love story, just one that required destroying mine to exist. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail in their perfect romantic narrative. They'd forgotten that fairy tales need villains, and sometimes the villain shows up right when the prince and princess think they've won. As the applause continued and the happy couple began walking back down the aisle, I stood up from behind the tree and walked directly into the aisle they'd have to cross to reach their reception. The first person to see me was Marcus. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. He stopped walking, causing Sarah to stumble slightly before she looked in the direction of his gaze. The moment Sarah saw me, she let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Her bouquet fell from her hands, scattering white roses across the grass. "David?" she whispered, but her voice was loud enough that the guests in the back row turned around. The ripple effect was immediate. Guest after guest realized who I was and what my presence meant. The cheerful chatter died, replaced by horrified silence. I could see my parents in the third row, my mother's hand pressed to her chest, my father rising from his seat with a look of panic. But I only had eyes for the bride and groom, frozen in their wedding attire like deer caught in headlights. "I thought you were at a work trip," I called out, my voice carrying across the vineyard with perfect clarity. Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked around desperately, as if someone might provide her with an explanation that would make this all make sense. Marcus found his voice first. "Dave, we can explain—" "Can you?" I interrupted, walking closer to them. "Because I'm really curious how you explain booking a hotel room together, planning a secret wedding, and stealing my entire future while pretending to be my loving fiancé and devoted brother." The guests were murmuring now, a low buzz of shock and confusion. I could hear fragments of whispered conversations. "That's Sarah's fiancé. How did he find out? Oh my God, this is a disaster." But I was focused on the couple in front of me, both still in their wedding attire, both looking like they'd seen a ghost. Because in a way, they had. They'd thought David the fiancé, David the brother, David the fool was safely at home, completely unaware that his life had been burned to the ground. But David the detective, David the prosecutor, David the man with nothing left to lose, he was standing right in front of them. And he'd brought a few things to say. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire about to snap. 20 pairs of eyes watched, as the three of us stood frozen in our triangle of destruction, the betrayed fiancé, the guilty bride, and the treacherous brother, all dressed up for a party that had just become a funeral. Sarah was the first to try to salvage the unsalvageable. "David, please, this isn't what it looks like," she started, but her words were so absurd that she stopped mid-sentence. She was literally wearing a wedding dress, standing next to my brother who'd just been declared her husband, at a ceremony I'd watched from start to finish. "It's not what it looks like," I repeated, my voice carrying across the vineyard. "So you're not wearing a wedding dress? Marcus isn't wearing my tuxedo. You didn't just promise to love each other until death do you part." The guests were starting to stand now, sensing that this conversation was about to escalate beyond polite family drama. Children were being quietly ushered toward the hotel, while adults remained frozen between curiosity and horror. Marcus stepped forward, trying to position himself between Sarah and me. Even now, he was protecting her. "Dave, we never meant for you to find out like this. How exactly did you mean for me to find out?" I asked. "Were you planning to tell me at Christmas dinner? Maybe save it for a fun announcement at my birthday party? Or were you just going to keep lying forever?" My mother finally found her voice from the audience. "David, sweetheart, please, let's talk about this privately." "Privately?" I turned to face her, and the look on my face made her take a step back. "Mom, you're wearing your best dress and your pearl necklace. You brought your good camera. You helped plan this. There's nothing private about what you've all done to me." The words hung in the air like acid rain. My mother started crying, which might have moved me if I hadn't just watched her celebrate my brother marrying my fiancée. Sarah tried again, her voice shaking. "David, if you could just let us explain—" "Explain what, Sarah? Explain how long you've been sleeping with my brother? Explain how you could kiss me goodbye Tuesday morning and marry him Thursday evening? Explain how you could look me in the eye every day for months while planning this behind my back?" Each question hit like a physical blow. Sarah was crying now too, her makeup running down her cheeks, but I felt no satisfaction in her tears. If anything, they made me angrier. She'd forfeited the right to be the victim the moment she said "I do" to my brother. "We fell in love," Marcus said quietly. "We never planned for this to happen." "You never planned for this to happen?" I laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Marcus, you booked a hotel room together 3 months ago. You put deposits down on this venue. You ordered matching rings. Sarah's been lying to me about work trips and girls' nights for half a year. This level of betrayal takes tremendous planning." The officiant, who'd been standing there holding his ceremony folder like a shield, finally spoke up. "Perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere more private." "No," I said firmly. "Everyone here made a choice to be part of this betrayal. Everyone here knew they were celebrating the destruction of my life. They can all hear how it ends." That's when I noticed something that made my rage crystallize into something harder and colder. Near the altar, there was a small table with unity candles. The same unity candles Sarah and I had picked out for our own ceremony. She hadn't just married my brother. She'd used the decorations we'd chosen together to do it. The realization must have shown on my face because Sarah followed my gaze and went even paler. "The candles," I said softly, then louder. "You used our Unity candles, the ones we picked out together at the wedding store in June. You used them to marry my brother." Sarah's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. There was no explanation for that level of calculated cruelty, but Marcus apparently still thought he could play peacekeeper. "Dave, we know this is painful, but Sarah and we found something real together, something we couldn't ignore. Something real." I stepped closer to them. "You want to talk about something real? Let me tell you what's real, Marcus. Real is working extra shifts for 6 months to pay for an engagement ring. Real is sitting through 4 hours of wedding cake tastings because your fiancé wants everything perfect. Real is calling her parents every Sunday for 4 years because you want them to love you like a son." My voice was getting louder, but I couldn't stop myself. "Real is lying awake at night worried about whether you're good enough, whether you make her happy enough, whether you deserve someone as amazing as her. And you know what else is real, brother? Finding out that while you're having all those doubts, she's been building a whole other life with the person who's supposed to have your back no matter what." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Sarah was sobbing openly now, mascara staining her white dress, but Marcus just stood there, taking it, his jaw set in a way I recognized from childhood fights. That's when I remembered something crucial. In my jacket pocket, my phone was still recording. I'd started the voice recorder during the flight to document my thoughts, planning to use it to organize my confrontation, but I'd forgotten to stop it, which meant I had audio of their entire ceremony, including their vows to love each other forever. Evidence, beautiful, permanent evidence of their betrayal, but more importantly, I could see the wedding photographer lurking near the reception area, camera in hand. The woman looked torn between professional obligation and human decency, but she was still there, still working, which meant she'd captured everything, including whatever happened next. I pulled out my phone, stopped the voice recording, and started a video. If everyone wanted to be part of this story, they were going to see how it ended. "You know what, Marcus? Sarah?" I held up my phone so they could see I was recording. "You both want to talk about love and finding something real? Let me give you something real to remember." I could see panic in their eyes now. This wasn't going according to their script. They'd expected anger, maybe some shouting, probably a dramatic exit. They hadn't expected documentation. "You're recording this," Sarah whispered. "Oh, I'm recording everything," I confirmed. "See, you two made a choice to make your betrayal public. You invited witnesses. You hired a photographer. You decided that your love story was worth celebrating." I gestured toward the horrified guests. "But love stories need endings, don't they? And I think everyone here deserves to see how this one really ends." That's when I started walking toward the reception area, where a microphone waited at the head table for the speeches that were supposed to celebrate the happy couple. Sarah realized what I was planning and started after me. "David, please don't do this." But I was already at the microphone, tapping it to make sure it was on. The feedback squeal that echoed across the vineyard got everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice now amplified for everyone to hear clearly, "I'd like to make a toast." The microphone crackled with feedback as 20 horrified faces stared at me from across the vineyard. Sarah had stopped following me and now stood frozen beside Marcus, both of them watching their perfect day dissolve into their worst nightmare. The photographer, bless her professional instincts, was still taking pictures, capturing every moment of their destruction. I looked out at the audience of family and friends who'd chosen to celebrate my betrayal. These people had watched me grow up, celebrated my engagement to Sarah, asked about our wedding plans at every family gathering. And they'd all known. They'd all chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. "I know this is unconventional," I continued, my voice steady and clear through the sound system. "Most people don't get surprise guests at their weddings. But then again, most people don't marry their brother's fiancée in secret." A few gasps echoed from the crowd, as if some guests were only now putting the pieces together. Sarah's elderly grandmother, who I'd bought Christmas presents for 3 years running, had her hand pressed to her chest in shock. "For those of you who don't know me," I said, gesturing toward myself with mock formality, "I'm David Thompson. Marcus is my brother, and Sarah? Well, Sarah was my fiancée until about 15 minutes ago." Marcus started walking toward me, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. "David, that's enough." "No, Marcus, I don't think it is enough," I said into the microphone, my voice overpowering his. "See, Everyone here got dressed up, drove all the way to wine country, bought gifts, took time off work, all to celebrate your love story. Don't you think they deserve to hear the whole story? I could see my father approaching from the other side, trying to flank me, but I was done being managed and protected and kept in the dark. The story of how you two met is actually pretty sweet, I continued. Sarah met Marcus at our family barbecue 3 years ago. She was already my girlfriend, already living in our apartment, already planning our future together. But apparently, she looked at my little brother and thought, now that's an upgrade. David, please. Sarah's voice was barely audible without amplification, but I could hear the desperation in it. And Marcus, I continued, turning toward my brother, you met Sarah and thought, she's perfect for me. Sure, she's engaged to my brother, but why should that matter? Because nothing says family loyalty like stealing your brother's fiancée. The crowd was shifting uncomfortably now, some people heading toward the parking lot, others pulling out their phones to record this disaster. The children had all been removed, but the adults were caught between wanting to leave and being unable to look away. But here's the really beautiful part of their love story, I said, warming to my theme. They didn't just have an affair. Anyone can have an affair. No, they planned a whole secret wedding. They picked out venues, ordered flowers, chose a menu, sent invitations to people who knew exactly what they were destroying. I made eye contact with my mother, who was now openly weeping. My own mother helped plan this. My parents, Sarah's parents, family friends. You all knew that Sarah was supposed to marry me in 6 weeks, and you decided that didn't matter. My father had reached the microphone area now and was trying to gesture for me to stop, but I shook my head. Dad, don't. You made your choice when you put on that tuxedo to watch your youngest son marry your oldest son's fiancée. Let me finish what you all started. I turned back to address the crowd. You want to know the really impressive part? Sarah kept up the act right until the end. She was texting me this morning about missing me, about being bored at her work conference, about how much she loves me. Meanwhile, she was getting her hair done for her wedding to my brother. The silence was absolute now, except for the sound of Sarah crying and the distant noise of cars starting in the parking lot. So I want you all to remember this moment, I continued. Remember the look on their faces when they realized their betrayal had consequences. Remember how quiet it got when someone finally told the truth. And remember that love built on lies and betrayal isn't actually love at all. It's just selfishness dressed up in wedding clothes. Marcus had stopped approaching and just stood there, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Sarah was crying so hard she could barely stand, leaning against a floral arrangement for support. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Now, I know what you're all thinking, I said, my voice carrying across the vineyard with crystalline clarity. You're thinking, David, this is so painful. Why don't you just leave? Why don't you take the high road? I paused, looking directly at Sarah and Marcus. But see, they didn't just break my heart. They didn't just end our relationship. They systematically lied to me for months, used my own family against me, and made me complicit in my own betrayal. They made me help plan the destruction of my own life. The microphone picked up every word, every pause, every breath. Sarah used my credit card to buy the shoes she's wearing right now. Marcus borrowed my car last weekend to go pick out their wedding rings. My mother asked me to recommend flowers because she was planning something special. She just didn't mention it was my replacement wedding. A few more guests slipped away, unable to handle the raw honesty of what they were witnessing. So here's my wedding gift to you both, I said, pulling out my phone and holding it up so they could see it was recording. Everyone here gets to see exactly who you really are. The photographer you hired gets to document your actual character. And this recording? This goes everywhere, every social media platform, every family group chat, every mutual friend. Sarah's sobs were audible now, even without amplification. David, please, we made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated into the microphone. Sarah, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is being 5 minutes late. What you did was a choice. Hundreds of choices made over months, all designed to betray the person who loved you most. I looked out at the remaining guests one final time. But you know what? I'm actually grateful this happened, because now I know exactly who each of you is when it matters. Now I know what my family loyalty is worth, what 4 years of love counts for, what promises mean in the Thompson family. That's when I delivered the 4 words that would haunt them forever. You deserve each other. The simplicity of it hit harder than any screaming or accusations could have. Those 4 words contained everything. My judgment, my dismissal, and my final goodbye to both of them. You deserve each other, I repeated, letting it sink in. A cheater and a betrayer. starting their marriage with lies and ending someone else's with cruelty. It's actually perfect. I set the microphone down gently, professionally, like I was finishing a best man speech instead of detonating their entire world. The silence that followed was complete. Even Sarah had stopped crying, shocked by the finality of those words. I walked past them without another glance, heading toward my rental car. Behind me, I could hear the chaos beginning. Hushed conversations, more people leaving, the sound of someone being sick in the bushes. But I didn't look back. I had said what I came to say. The drive back to San Francisco International Airport was a blur of golden California hills and the devastating satisfaction of finally telling the truth. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since I left the vineyard. Calls from Marcus, from my parents, from Sarah, even from numbers I didn't recognize. Wedding guests, probably, wanting to process what they'd just witnessed. I turned the phone off. They'd had months to talk to me honestly. Now it was too late. The first flight back to Chicago didn't leave until the next morning, so I spent the night in an airport hotel, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the past 4 years. How many times had Sarah kissed me while thinking about Marcus? How many family dinners had I sat through, joking with my brother while he was planning to steal my life? The worst part was realizing how many signs I'd missed because I'd trusted them completely. Love, it turns out, makes you incredibly stupid. I finally turned my phone back on during my layover in Denver. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages. My voicemail was completely full. The messages from Sarah ranged from desperate to angry to bargaining. "David, please call me back. We need to talk about this. You humiliated us in front of everyone. That was cruel and unnecessary. I know you're hurt, but what you did was unforgivable. Please, I'm begging you, call me back so we can figure this out." The progression from guilt to victimhood was almost impressive. In the span of 12 hours, she'd managed to convince herself that I was the villain in this story. Marcus's messages were different, shorter, more direct. "Call me. Dave, we need to talk. I know you hate me right now, but I'm still your brother. What you did today crossed a line. What I did crossed a line. The man who'd stolen my fiancée and married her in secret thought I had crossed a line by showing up to object. But the messages from my parents were the hardest to read. From Dad: "Son, I know you're angry, but that wasn't the way to handle this. Call me when you're ready to talk like adults." From Mom: "David, sweetheart, I know this is hard, but Marcus and Sarah are really in love. Can't you find it in your heart to be happy for them? Family is more important than anything. Family is more important than anything." I read that message 3 times, letting the full weight of its cruelty sink in. My mother had helped my brother steal my fiancée, had sat in the front row watching him marry her, and now she wanted me to be happy about it because family is more important than anything. Apparently I wasn't family. I was just an inconvenience. By the time I landed in Chicago, the story had already spread beyond our immediate circle. Sarah's sister had posted Instagram stories about the drama at the wedding. Someone had uploaded a video of my microphone speech to TikTok, where it was rapidly gaining views and comments. "This man is iconic for this. Imagine thinking you can steal someone's fiancé and not face consequences. The audacity of marrying your brother's girlfriend, then acting like he's the problem." Those 4 words hit harder than any revenge could. The internet, at least, understood what my family apparently couldn't, that what Sarah and Marcus had done was unforgivable. I took a cab home to the apartment Sarah and I had shared, dreading what I'd find there. But walking through the door was somehow worse than I'd expected. Everything looked exactly the same. Our photos on the walls, her coffee mug in the sink, the wedding planning binder still open on the kitchen counter. But it was all fake now. Every shared moment, every future plan, every sign of our life together was just evidence of how completely I'd been deceived. That's when I found the letter. It was sitting on our bed, the bed where we'd slept together every night while she was planning to marry my brother, in an envelope with my name written in Sarah's careful handwriting. "David," it began, "I know you'll never forgive me for this, but I need you to understand that Marcus and I never meant for this to happen. We fell in love, and sometimes love doesn't follow the rules we want it to follow. Love doesn't follow the rules." As if love was some uncontrollable force that had compelled her to book hotel rooms and wedding venues and lie to my face for months. I know this seems calculated and cruel, but we were trying to find a way to tell you that wouldn't destroy our families. We thought if we could just get married quietly and present it as a fait accompli, maybe you'd eventually understand and forgive us. A fait accompli. She'd planned to come home from her fake work trip as Marcus's wife and expected me to just accept it. Marcus is my soulmate, David. I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth. What we have is deeper than what you and I had. It's not about you not being enough, it's about Marcus being perfect. She'd written that, actually put pen to paper, and written that Marcus was perfect while I was just not enough. I hope someday you'll find someone who loves you the way Marcus loves me. And I hope you can find it in your heart to be happy for us. The letter was signed, "With love and regret, Sarah. With love." She'd signed her confession of betrayal, "With love." I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash, then immediately pulled it back out. Evidence. I was going to need evidence for the legal proceedings that were surely coming, because this wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. Sarah's name was on our lease, our joint bank accounts, our wedding vendor contracts. Marcus was supposed to be in my wedding party, was listed as my emergency contact at work, had keys to my apartment. Untangling 4 years of shared life was going to be messy, and based on their messages, they weren't planning to make it easy. My phone rang again. This time it was Jake, my best friend and supposed best man. "Dude," he said without preamble, "please tell me the video I'm watching isn't real." "Which video?" I asked, though I already knew. "The one where you crash your brother's wedding and give the most savage speech in human history." I sat down heavily on the couch Sarah and I had picked out together, that she'd apparently been sitting on while texting Marcus behind my back. "It's real," I confirmed. "Jesus Christ, Dave, I mean, what they did was unforgivable, but that was nuclear." "Jake," I said quietly, "my fiancée married my brother while lying to me about being on a work trip. My parents helped plan it. They used decorations from our wedding to do it. What exactly was the proportional response?" There was a long pause. "You know what? You're right. Fuck them. All of them. What do you need?" And that's how I learned who my real family was. Not the people who shared my blood and chose to betray me, but the friends who stood by me when it mattered. Over the next few days, the calls and messages from my biological family continued, each one revealing more about how long this betrayal had been in the works. My father admitted he'd known for a few months, but thought it was just a phase. My mother revealed that Sarah had asked for her blessing to marry Marcus 6 weeks ago. An aunt let slip that there had been a whole family discussion about whether to tell me, and they'd decided it would be kinder to let me find out after the fact. Kinder. They'd thought it would be kinder to let me live in ignorance while everyone I trusted conspired against me. But the worst revelation came from my cousin Jake, Marcus's best man, who called me drunk and guilty 3 days after the wedding. "Dave, I need to tell you something," he slurred into the phone. "Sarah was pregnant last year, in March. She lost the baby, but it wasn't yours, man. It was Marcus's. That's when they decided to leave you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sarah had been pregnant with my brother's baby while engaged to me, had miscarried, and had used the grief I'd comforted her through as bonding time with him. Every tender moment I'd shared with her during that difficult time, every night I'd held her while she cried, every day I'd taken off work to care for her, every reassurance that we'd have children when the time was right, had been about another man's child. "How long have you known?" I asked Jake. "Since the miscarriage. Marcus was a wreck, kept calling me crying about losing his baby. I told him he had to tell you, man. I told him this was insane. But you still stood up at their wedding." Another pause. Yeah, I did. And I hate myself for it. It wasn't enough, but it was something. At least one person in my family felt guilty about their betrayal. That night, I finally returned Marcus's calls. "Thank God," he said when he picked up. "Dave, we need to talk. We need to talk about Sarah's miscarriage," I interrupted. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. "How did you—" he started. "Jake, apparently he's been carrying your secret for a year and needed to confess. So tell me, Marcus, how long were you sleeping with my fiancée before she got pregnant with your baby?" Marcus's confession came in broken pieces over the next 2 hours, delivered through tears and justifications and the desperate hope that somehow explaining the timeline would make it hurt less. It didn't. "It started at Jenny's wedding," he began, referring to our cousin's ceremony 18 months ago. "Sarah was upset because you'd been working so much, and she felt neglected. We were both drinking and we just talked, really talked, and she said she'd been feeling disconnected from you. I remembered that wedding. I'd been pulling double shifts to save for Sarah's engagement ring, working 70-hour weeks to afford the 2-carat diamond she'd been dreaming about. While I was exhausting myself to make her dreams come true, she was bonding with my brother over how neglected she felt. It was just talking at first, Marcus continued. But she was so sad, and you were always at work, and I started texting her just to check in, just as friends. When did it stop being just as friends, Marcus? The pause was so long I thought he'd hung up. 3 weeks after Jenny's wedding. We met for coffee to talk about planning a surprise party for your birthday. We ended up kissing in the parking lot. My birthday surprise party. They'd started their affair while planning my birthday party. And then we tried to stop. We both felt terrible about it. Sarah almost told you a dozen times. But she didn't, he confirmed, because we couldn't stay away from each other, Dave. We tried, but we were in love. Really, in love. Love. There was that word again, used like a shield against accountability. So you kept sleeping together while she lived with me, while she was engaged to me, while she was planning our wedding. Yes, at least he didn't try to sugarcoat it. For how long, Marcus? 15 months. 15 months. Sarah had been cheating on me for over a year. We'd celebrated our anniversary, gone on vacation, picked out our wedding venue, all while she was living a double life with my brother. The pregnancy, I said, happened 8 months ago. She was going to tell you then, was going to leave you for me, but then she lost the baby, and she couldn't handle losing both at the same time. So she chose me by default. No, that's exactly what it was, Marcus. She stayed with me because she was grieving the loss of your baby and didn't want to deal with the additional trauma of blowing up her life. I was her consolation prize. The next part of his confession was even worse. After the miscarriage, we decided to really try to end it, Marcus said. Sarah threw herself into wedding planning with you, and I started dating other people. We went 3 months without any contact. 3 months. I remembered that period. It was when Sarah had suddenly become the perfect fiancée again, enthusiastic about wedding planning, affectionate, present. I'd thought we'd turned a corner in our relationship. In reality, she'd just been trying to convince herself that she could settle for me. But then, I prompted, I realized I couldn't live without her, and she realized she couldn't marry you while being in love with me, so we started planning to be together. You mean you started planning my destruction? We started planning our life together, he corrected, as if the semantics mattered. We were going to tell you after we got married. We thought it would be easier if we could present it as a done deal, something real and permanent, instead of just an affair. Easier for them. And everyone knew, Mom, Dad, all the guests at your wedding. We had to tell them. We needed witnesses for the ceremony, and we couldn't get married without family there. But you could betray family without a second thought. Marcus started crying then, which should have made me feel something. But I was past the point of sympathy for either of them. Dave, I know you hate me. I know I destroyed our relationship, but I need you to understand, Sarah and I, what we have is real. It's not just about hurting you. We genuinely love each other. You love each other so much that you built your relationship on lies and betrayal. You love each other so much that you were willing to destroy your own brother to be together. That's not love, Marcus. That's obsession. It's love, he insisted. And someday, when you're not so angry, you'll understand that love doesn't always follow the rules. Stop, I interrupted. Stop saying that. Love doesn't excuse betrayal. Love doesn't justify cruelty. Love doesn't make it okay to systematically lie to someone for over a year. What you two have isn't love. It's selfishness with good publicity. But Marcus wasn't done with his revelations. There's something else you need to know, he said quietly. The apartment you and Sarah shared, we've been meeting there when you were at work. She gave me a key 6 months ago. My apartment, my home, my bed. How many times? I don't know. Dozens, maybe hundreds. We were together there every day you worked late. Every day I worked late to pay for our life together. They were in my home, in my bed, laughing about how clueless I was. The wedding dress she wore, I said, not really asking. She bought it for our wedding with your credit card. Of course she did. The honeymoon you two are taking? Bali. The same trip you and Sarah planned together. They'd stolen our entire life and repackaged it as their love story. Is there anything, I asked slowly, anything at all about your relationship that wasn't built on my destruction? The silence stretched so long that I knew the answer before he spoke. No, Marcus finally whispered. No, I guess there isn't. That admission should have been satisfying, but it just made me tired. Bone deep, existentially tired. Don't contact me again, I told him. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at my door. Don't send Mom or Dad to talk to me. Don't try to explain or justify or apologize. You made your choice, now live with it. Dave, you're my brother. No, I said firmly. Brothers don't steal each other's lives. Brothers don't conspire to destroy each other. Brothers don't lie for over a year while planning each other's betrayal. You stopped being my brother the first time you kissed my fiancée. I hung up before he could respond, but the story wasn't over. Because that night, I got a call from Sarah's sister Emma, who was drunk and apparently feeling guilty about her role in the deception. "David, it's Emma. I need to tell you something." Emma had been one of Sarah's bridesmaids, had helped plan their secret wedding, had known about the affair from the beginning. "Sarah made me promise not to tell you," she slurred, "but I can't live with this anymore. She never loved you, David. Not really. She told me so last year." My grip tightened on the phone. "What did she tell you?" "She said you were safe and stable and would make a good father, but that she wasn't attracted to you anymore. She said being with Marcus made her feel alive in a way you never did." Emma wasn't finished destroying me. She was planning to leave you anyway, even before Marcus. She said she felt trapped in your relationship but didn't know how to get out without looking like the bad guy. Marcus just gave her an excuse. She was planning to leave me? She had a whole exit strategy. She was going to wait until after your lease was up, then break up with you and move back in with her parents. She said it would be the kindest way to end things. The kindest way. Just like my family's decision not to tell me about the affair. "But then Marcus happened," Emma continued, "and suddenly, she didn't want to just leave you. She wanted to replace you. She said it was perfect because she could have the wedding and the honeymoon and the life she wanted, just with a better groom." "A better groom." "Emma," I said carefully, "why are you telling me this now?" "Because what you did at the wedding was brave," she said. "And because Sarah's been calling everyone, trying to make herself the victim in this story. She's telling people you were abusive, that she was afraid to break up with you, that she only lied because you were controlling and jealous. Of course she was. The woman who'd lived a double life for 15 months, who'd used my credit card to buy her wedding dress for another man, who'd brought my brother into my bed while I worked to support her, she was now painting herself as the victim." "Don't let her rewrite history, David," Emma said. "Don't let her make you the villain in her story. What you said at that wedding about them deserving each other, that was the truest thing anyone said all day." After Emma hung up, I sat in the dark apartment that Sarah and Marcus had been using as their secret meeting place, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had never been real, and finally understood the full scope of what had been done to me. This wasn't a love story gone wrong. This wasn't about passion overcoming reason or hearts wanting what they couldn't have. This was a calculated, systematic destruction of my life, carried out by the two people I'd trusted most, with the full cooperation of my family and friends. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd erased me, replaced me, rewritten 4 years of history to make me the obstacle to their happiness instead of the victim of their cruelty. But I was done being their victim. It was time to take control of my own story. The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. When your fiancée uses your joint credit card to plan her secret wedding to your brother, the paper trail is embarrassingly clear. Sarah's attorney, paid for with money from our joint account, tried to argue that emotional distress justified her financial decisions, but it's hard to claim victimhood when you're literally holding wedding photos of yourself, marrying someone else. Within 2 months, I had my name removed from every account, lease, and contract we'd shared. Sarah had to repay $23,000 in wedding expenses she'd charged to our joint credit card for her ceremony with Marcus. The engagement ring, my grandmother's ring that I'd reset for her, was returned through lawyers, along with every gift I'd given her during our 4 years together. The apartment we'd shared became entirely mine when Sarah forfeited her portion of the security deposit in exchange for me not pursuing additional damages. Walking through those rooms after she'd moved out, all her belongings was surreal, like archaeological evidence of a life that had never actually existed. Marcus tried to reach out twice more, both times through intermediaries. Once through our cousin Jake, who delivered a message about Marcus wanting to make things right. I told Jake that the only way Marcus could make things right was to invent time travel. The second attempt came through my father, who called to say that Marcus was struggling with guilt and needed forgiveness for his own mental health. I told my father that Marcus's mental health wasn't my responsibility anymore. The hardest part wasn't losing Sarah. I'd mourned her long before I knew she was gone. The hardest part was losing my family. My parents continued to prioritize Marcus's comfort over my pain, hosting him and Sarah for Sunday dinners, while treating me like the unreasonable one for refusing to move on. "They're married now," my mother said during one particularly frustrating phone call. "What's done is done. Can't you just accept it and move forward?" "Mom," I replied, If someone burned down your house, would you invite them over for dinner because what's done is done? That's different. How? She couldn't answer that question. By Christmas, 6 months after the wedding crash, the family dynamics had crystallized into permanent positions. Marcus and Sarah were the golden couple, hosting holidays and family events, while I was the bitter brother who couldn't let go of the past. When I declined to attend Christmas dinner, citing the obvious conflict of celebrating with people who'd systematically betrayed me, I was accused of holding grudges and choosing anger over family. But here's what they didn't understand. I wasn't angry anymore, I was free. Free from a relationship built on lies. Free from a family that valued keeping peace over protecting truth. Free from the exhausting work of loving people who saw my loyalty as a weakness to exploit rather than a gift to treasure. The internet never forgot. Videos of my wedding speech occasionally resurged on social media, usually accompanied by comments praising my iconic energy and analyzing the psychology of family betrayal. Sarah hated it. According to mutual friends, she and Marcus had considered moving to a different state to escape the attention. But they stayed in Chicago, perhaps hoping that time would soften people's memories. It didn't. Their story became cautionary tale at family gatherings and social events throughout the city, the couple whose love story required destroying a brother to exist. 6 months after the wedding, I ran into Jake, my former best friend and Marcus's best man, at a coffee shop near my new apartment. "Dave," he said, approaching my table cautiously. "How are you doing, man?" "Better," I said honestly. "Much better. I know this doesn't mean much now, but I'm sorry. About all of it. About standing up there, about not telling you, about choosing sides." I studied his face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus performative guilt. What I found was a man who'd learned something about himself that he didn't like. "Jake," I said finally, "what would you have done if you were me? If you'd walked into that wedding and seen your fiancée marrying your brother?" He sat down across from me without invitation. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe screamed, maybe punched someone, maybe just left." "All of those would have let them control the narrative," I pointed out. "They could have painted me as unstable, violent, or cowardly. The speech made them own their choices publicly." Jake nodded slowly. "You made them face the truth about what they'd done, in front of everyone." "I made them face the truth about who they were," I corrected. "The betrayal was always there. I just made it visible." We talked for another hour, and by the end, Jake had offered a sincere apology and asked if we could rebuild our friendship slowly. I told him I'd think about it. Some bridges, once burned, can be rebuilt. Others need to stay burned to prevent future fires. A year after the wedding crash, I was living in a new apartment, working at a new company, and dating a woman named Claire who knew the whole story and loved me anyway. Claire had actually seen the wedding speech video before we met and told me later that my honesty and strength in that moment were part of what attracted her to me. "You didn't just survive betrayal," she said one night as we cooked dinner together. "You refused to let it define you as a victim. That takes incredible strength." Sarah and Marcus's marriage, according to the gossip network of mutual friends, was struggling. Turns out that relationships built on betrayal and lies don't translate well to stable partnerships. Who could have predicted that two people capable of such elaborate deception might not be completely trustworthy with each other? They'd had trust issues from the beginning. Sarah worried that Marcus might cheat on her the way he'd cheated with her, and Marcus resented Sarah's continued contact with some of her ex-boyfriends, given her track record. Their honeymoon had been cut short due to arguments, and they were reportedly in couples counseling within 6 months of marriage. But their struggles weren't my victory. My victory was the life I'd built afterward. Honest relationships, clear boundaries, and the hard-won knowledge that I was worth more than settling for people who saw my love as optional. 2 years later, Claire and I got engaged. Our engagement party was small but genuine, friends who'd stood by me during the darkest period of my life, colleagues who'd become family, Claire's wonderful family who welcomed me completely. My parents weren't invited. Marcus and Sarah weren't mentioned. The chapter of my life that they'd authored through betrayal was closed, and I was writing new chapters with people who understood that love requires integrity. During my engagement party speech, I thanked everyone for celebrating with us and made one reference to my past. I learned the hard way that trust is the foundation of any relationship worth having. Thank you all for being people I can trust and for celebrating a love that's built on honesty from day one. Claire squeezed my hand as I spoke, understanding exactly what I meant. Someone later posted a video of that speech on social media with the caption, This is what healing looks like. It didn't go viral like the wedding crash speech had, but it got enough attention that I received messages from people sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. You showed me it's possible to not just survive betrayal, but to thrive afterward, wrote one woman whose husband had left her for her sister. Your wedding crash speech helped me find the courage to confront my own cheating spouse, wrote another. The most meaningful message came from a young man whose best friend had stolen his girlfriend. You taught me that dignity isn't about being the bigger person. It's about telling the truth and refusing to let people rewrite your story. Thank you. I realized then that my story had become bigger than my personal experience. It had become proof that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of a better one. 3 years after the wedding crash, Claire and I were married in a small ceremony surrounded by people who'd earned their place in our lives through loyalty and love. The wedding was everything Sarah and I had planned together, but better, more authentic, more joyful, more real. As I danced with my wife at our reception, I caught sight of my reflection in the window and realized something profound. I was happier than I'd ever been during my relationship with Sarah. What I'd thought was love had actually been anxiety, constantly trying to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. Real love, I'd learned, doesn't require you to be more than you are. It celebrates exactly who you are and chooses you consistently, in public and in private, through good times and bad. Sarah and Marcus had done me the greatest favor of my life by showing me what I was worth to them. It had hurt terribly at the time, but it had also freed me to find people who valued me properly. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. It just takes time to see it that way. As for those 4 words that ended everything, you deserve each other, I meant them more than ever. They were perfect for each other. 2 people who believed that love justified any betrayal, that passion excused any cruelty, that their happiness was worth any amount of collateral damage. They deserved each other completely, and I deserved so much better. I got it.